Okay, we're come to chapter 20 in the book of Revelation. In chapter 19, we saw the last story finish up. So that's the last plague, the final plague, seen 6 times. Thank goodness we're done with the blood and guts. So Satan's gonna still be bound, so there's some judgment still to come. But we're coming to that period of Jesus' reign on earth. Finally, this is what we look forward to. Jesus is gonna reign on earth. So, verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed a little season. So we got this bottomless pit. We saw 4 angels, which were the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse there, that the conqueror, the war, the famine, and pestilence. They were bound in the great river Euphrates. These are spirits that are bound. The bottomless pit, you can think of that as death or just this place for the dead. So these spirits, that's if they don't go to God, they go down to this bottomless pit, and that is the torment side of hell. Satan's going to be down there. The dragon, which is the devil and Satan. So it's nice we don't have to guess at what the dragon is. And so for 1,000 years, Satan's not going to be able to cause any trouble on earth. So he's been causing problems since the 3rd chapter in Genesis. So God made everything, it was good. Satan came and it was bad. And as long as Satan reigned, it was bad. But now he is going to be bound up and God has taken his reign. And again, 1,000 years. It says that specifically to me, 1,000 years means 1,000 years. So we're just going to go with the literal interpretation there. One sad note, after the 1,000 years, Satan's going to be let out again. So just like those 4 angels were bound at the great river Euphrates, well, they came out. And the same way, Satan's going to come back upon the earth. So verse 4, and I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received the mark on their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. So in chapter 14, 1 through 5, we saw the 144,000 were the first fruits of the resurrection. So this is the 2 witnesses, same thing. They were the first part of this first resurrection. That kind of eliminates a resurrection and a rapture happening in chapter 4. We had to have the first fruits. If you believe this is all in one line, that didn't happen until chapter 14. Now in chapter 20, we get the first resurrection, not the second. So this is the first resurrection. This is the first time we see in chapter 14, verse 14 to 16, we saw the harvest. That's the resurrection. That's the rapture. That's when this happens. Don't know what more to say. It happens here. It doesn't happen anywhere else. It's a one-time event. People that died without taking that mark, they're going to be part of this resurrection. People that were already in heaven, they're going to be part of this resurrection. People that died, we said heaven was closed during the time when those plagues were poured out. They're going to be part of this resurrection. Verse 5, but the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. So those that aren't part of the first resurrection, they're not going to be resurrected at this time. So they have to wait. They'll be in that place of torment until the 1,000 years are ended. Their judgment hasn't come yet. But if you belong to God, your judgment has come. You've been judged righteous because you have the righteousness of Christ. Verse 6, blessed and holy is he that has part in the first resurrection. On such the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So we'll be kings and priests. The Levites, under the law, they couldn't be kings and priests. So they could be one or the other. And kings that tried to do priestly duties weren't kings very long. So God hated that. Sometimes they took it upon themselves to do those things. That just didn't work out for them. But anyway, we're going to reign on earth for 1,000 years. If you're wondering what's going to happen, well, that's it. I don't know what that looks like, but we're going to be rulers. We're not going to be playing a heavenly harp somewhere. We're actually going to have duties that we'll have. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan will be loosed out of his prison. So we got 1,000 good years, and then Satan's back to cause more trouble. And shall go out to deceive the nations which are at the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together for battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. Before the millennial kingdom, this 1,000 year reign of Christ, Satan gathers up all the world's armies to fight against God. And, well, here we go again. Satan's gathered up all the world's armies to fight against God. I'm going to start over at verse 7. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are at the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, encompassed the camp of the saints about, that beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. So there's a second death. So there was a place of torment, but apparently that wasn't enough. Now there's going to be this lake of fire. That's the final judgment for those that don't go to live with God. An eternal punishment. Again, these are spirits. So Satan and the beast and the false prophet, and your spirit will be there if you don't belong to God. I would urge you very strongly to spend some time with Jesus every day and develop that relationship with him, that you never fall away. And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, according to their works. So interesting. God's got a record of everything that you ever did, said, whatever. God cleansed us from our sin. We don't have to worry about that. But what he's going to do is reward us for what we did right. So we don't get saved by our good works, but we get rewarded for them. If you led anybody to Christ, you get a reward for that. Verse 13, and the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged, every man according to their works. If you don't believe in Jesus, then you get judged for your works. That's your salvation. Did you do enough good to be saved? Did you keep the whole law? Well, you didn't. You're going to be burned in that lake of fire. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. So all those that don't belong to Jesus, they'll go from that original place of torment to this new place. And whosoever was not found in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. That's the final judgment at the second resurrection after the 1,000-year reign of Jesus. There's a couple interesting things. So in 1 Corinthians 15, let me go there. We kind of have an order starting in verse 20. But now is Christ risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all die, even so in Christ all shall be made alive. But every man in his own order. Christ the first fruits, afterwards they are Christ that is coming. That's the first resurrection. So we had another first fruits in chapter 14. I went over. 24, then comes the end, when he shall have delivered up the kingdom to God, even the Father, when he shall have put down all rule and all authority and power. For he must reign till he has put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. So Jesus reigns for 1,000 years, and the last enemy is death. The last enemy that gets destroyed is death. Satan's still going to rise, and he's going to have those people from all over the earth. But death is going to be gone at that time. So that's kind of interesting what happens to those people. Well, they don't get destroyed. They get cast alive into the lake of fire with Satan. So they're immortal at that time. So after the 1,000 years, apparently everyone's immortal. And so God catches those in the city. Who knows? We may have already been caught up. So there's actually a second rapture and a resurrection, because people will die that belong to Christ during those 1,000 years. There's going to be a second rapture, second resurrection, and we're going to be caught up into a new Jerusalem that's not on this earth. And the rest of those people that are still here on earth, they're all going to go to that place of torment. So there's a clash in heaven between Satan and Michael and their angels. So they're all immortal. I don't know how these immortal battles work, how you possibly win one of those, but Satan knows, and he's going to try and have one more of those. But joke's on him; they're already gone. And God's just going to get rid of them. And we see in verse 1551 in 1 Corinthians, it says, "Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. For the trumpet of God shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory." So death is swallowed up in victory at the end of those 1,000 years. So I believe this passage right here, everybody says, yeah, that's the rapture. But I believe this is the second rapture. So after the 1,000 years, when God's going to get rid of this earth and everything that's left on it, God's going to take his people to the New Jerusalem. And so it's the last trump. Again, the trumpet is the voice of God. So the last time he speaks over this earth, God's people are going to be caught away up to the New Jerusalem in heaven. That's different. We'll look at the rapture verse in 1 Thessalonians, verses 13 to 17. "But I would not have you ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that you sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him." So the dead bodies are sleeping in their graves, but the spirits are up in heaven with Jesus, and Jesus is going to bring them with him at the time of the first resurrection. "For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent or precede them which are asleep." If we're alive, the rapture is not going to happen before the resurrection happens, is what that's saying. "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel." So we heard the voice of an angel at the time in that Revelation 14 through 16 time. He called to Jesus and says, now's the time. "And with the trump of God." Again, this is the voice of God, and this would be the first trumpet. We got a last trumpet over there in the Corinthians. "And the dead in Christ shall rise first." The people that are dead, they're going to come out of their graves, and they're going to be standing next to the people that are alive. "And then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds." So we're going to be changed in just a moment, and we're going to be standing next to the dead that are now alive. And together we're going to go up. Our bodies are going to go up to meet Jesus and to meet the Lord in the air. "And so we shall ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words." So Christians don't have to worry about death. We never die. Our spirits immediately go to be with Jesus, and our bodies, even those, will be coming back up out of the ground. And if we're alive to see this when Jesus comes, so much the better. So 2 resurrections, 2 raptures on either end of this 1,000-year reign of Christ.